Let the record show that Emergency Session 47 Omega of the Galactic Council of Scientific Anomalies has been called to order, announced High Administrator ZYX Norbar, her 7 eye stalks quivering with undisguised agitation. The chamber fell silent as representatives from 17 species settled into their environmentally customized seating arrangements. I apologize for the unconventional timing, continued ZYX Norbar, her translucent blue skin pulsing with nervous chromatophores. But the findings from Observation Post Terra 9 cannot wait for standard procedural reviews. The massive holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing a peculiar blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Earth, she stated flatly. Home to the species designated humans. As you know, we have maintained discrete observation for approximately 73 local solar cycles since their discovery. They remain technologically primitive, having achieved only rudimentary interplanetary travel within their own system. Senior xenobiologist Krell-Thag, a mantis-like being from the Rigelian Collective, clicked his mandibles in a gesture of dismissal. Administrator, with all due respect, why has the Council been assembled with such urgency to discuss a Level 2 pre-FTL species? There are protocols. Because, ZYX Norbar interrupted, unusual for her typically meticulous adherence to Council etiquette, they appear to possess abilities that defy our understanding of biology, physics, and possibly reality itself. A ripple of murmurs circulated through the chamber. Chief Observer Plixner, please present your findings. A small, gray-skinned being with enormous black eyes stepped forward. He wore the distinctive silver uniform of the Galactic Observation Corps, adorned with the blue stripes indicating specialization in primitive species monitoring. Esteemed Council members, began Plixner, his voice surprisingly deep for his diminutive stature. What I am about to show you was recorded 17 Earth days ago at Observation Post Terra 9. The hologram shifted to display footage from what appeared to be a covert observation drone. It showed a human dwelling, a small structure with a detached vehicle storage unit. A middle-aged human male with a slight paunch and thinning hair stood in a room filled with wooden objects in various stages of completion. This is Subject 7734-B, known locally as Dave Johnson, explained Plixner. Occupation, weekend woodworker. We had been monitoring him as part of our standard diversity sampling protocol. The Council watched as Dave methodically measured a piece of wood, marked it, and began cutting it with a primitive powered blade tool. Fascinating, deadpan Council Representative Kuln of the Silicon Hive mind. He's cutting processed plant matter. Shall we also observe them respiring oxygen next? A few appreciative trills echoed around the chamber. Please continue observing, Plixner requested, seemingly unperturbed. On the hologram, Dave finished his cut, inspected the piece, and then attempted to fit it into a partially assembled wooden structure. It didn't fit. He tried again, pushing harder. Still no success. Preliminary analysis indicates this is a moment of minor functional failure, narrated Plixner. Dave's face reddened slightly. He measured the piece again, muttering something inaudible. He tried once more to fit the wooden pieces together, applying considerable force. When they still wouldn't join, Dave's expression transformed dramatically. God damn it. The human's voice suddenly boomed through the Council chamber, causing several members to recoil in their seats. What happened next caused visible distress among the Council. As Dave's face contorted with anger, the ambient light in the recording seemed to dim. The wooden piece in his hands, the one that had refused to fit, suddenly warped before their eyes, reshaping itself to the perfect dimensions needed. Dave blinked, anger dissipating as quickly as it had arrived. He looked at the now perfectly fitting piece with mild surprise, shrugged, and continued working. Plixner paused the recording. We have documented 714 similar incidents across 189 subjects in the past Earth year alone. When humans experience a specific emotional state they call anger, they appear capable of temporarily altering local reality parameters. Preposterous, declared Chief Physicist Erlex 7, her tentacles coiling tightly around her hover chair. This is clearly a failure of observation equipment. Or perhaps an elaborate attempt at humor by the junior observers? I assure you, it is neither, replied Plixner. We have verified the phenomenon using 7 different observation technologies. We have even collected physical samples showing molecular reconfiguration. The hologram changed again, this time showing a busy human transportation thoroughfare filled with wheeled vehicles. Subject 4421A, Michael Wilson, commuting to his workplace, Plixner explained. The council watched as the human sat in his vehicle, increasingly displaying physical signs of agitation as other vehicles prevented his forward progress. Come on, move it already. Michael suddenly shouted, slamming his upper limbs against the circular navigation control. The moment the words left his mouth, vehicles ahead of him inexplicably shifted positions, creating a clear path forward. The drivers of those vehicles appeared momentarily confused but continued on their way. Impossible, whispered Krelthag. That would require simultaneous manipulation of multiple independent systems. More examples? Asked Zyx Norbar. Plixner nodded and the hologram shifted again. A female human stood in what appeared to be a food preparation area, operating a device that mixed substances in a container. She frowned at the results, consulted a data sheet, and added more ingredients. After activating the mixing device again, she dipped a small utensil into the mixture and tasted it, her face immediately contorting. This tastes like garbage. Work, stupid recipe. The substance in the container briefly shimmered with an almost imperceptible glow, then settled. When the woman tasted it again, her expression changed to surprise and pleasure. An anomalous molecular reconfiguration, commented Plixner. Thousands of complex chemical reactions accelerated and altered in milliseconds. The council chamber erupted in overlapping questions and exclamations. Order, commanded Zyx Norbar, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic system. Once quiet had been restored, she continued, Chief Observer, your assessment of the scope and severity of this phenomenon? Plixner's gray skin paled slightly. It appears to be an ability shared by all humans, though the potency varies considerably between individuals. Most concerning is that they seem almost entirely unaware of it. They dismiss these occurrences as coincidence, luck, or simply fail to notice them at all. Could this be some form of evolved psychic ability, suggested Representative Kuhn. Our analysis suggests something far more fundamental, replied Plixner. It appears to be a localized suspension of certain physical constants, followed by a reality reconfiguration according to the human's desired outcome. In essence, when sufficiently angry, humans can temporarily tell reality to adjust itself. Theoretical limit of this ability, asked Krelthag, his scientific curiosity evidently overcoming his initial skepticism. Unknown, admitted Plixner. But we have observed instances of progressively greater magnitude. The hologram shifted to a sports facility filled with thousands of humans. One team was performing poorly, judging by the numeric display and the collective expressions of displeasure. Come on, you idiots. Defense. Defense, chanted the crowd, their faces showing clear signs of the emotional state identified as anger. On the playing field, the opposing team's athletes suddenly tripped over nothing, dropping the spherical object they had been carrying. The home team recovered it and scored, triggering jubilant celebrations. We've documented 47 statistically impossible outcome reversals in these sporting events when the collective anger of human observers reaches critical thresholds, explained Plixner. They're manipulating probability fields, gasped Erlex, 7. That shouldn't be possible without at least Class 6 technology. And yet, said Plixner grimly, these pre-FTL primates do it by shouting and turning red. The council chamber fell into uneasy silence as the implications sank in. There's more, continued Plixner after a moment. We've observed that specific linguistic elements may enhance the effect. Certain phrases like, God damn it, come on, and particularly potent modifiers they call swear words seem to catalyze the reality-altering process. A linguistic reality manipulation interface, mused Kuhn. Fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. ZYX Norbar's chromatophores had shifted to a deep purple, indicating severe concern. Your recommendation, Chief Observer? Plixner hesitated. I believe we should escalate Earth's classification from observe, no contact to caution, potential existential threat. If humans ever discover and learn to control this ability, show them the military application, urged a voice from the back of the chamber. It was General Vrex, the rarely seen representative from the Galactic Defense Force. Plixner seemed reluctant but complied. The hologram changed to show what appeared to be a human military training exercise. A group of uniformed humans were engaged in simulated combat. One human, identified as Sergeant Frank Thompson, was leading his unit through a difficult obstacle course while carrying heavy equipment. As they fell behind the expected completion time, Frank's expression darkened. Move your asses now. We are not going to be last. Not on my watch, he bellowed, face contorted with rage. What happened next caused several council members to emit involuntary distress vocalizations. The entire unit seemed to briefly blur, moving with impossible speed and coordination. They completed the remaining obstacles in one-third the expected time, setting a new record according to the stunned-looking evaluation officer. Now show them the incident at Testing Site Bravo, General Vrex commanded. Plixner looked to ZYX Norbar, who gave a reluctant nod of approval. The hologram shifted to show a different human, a civilian construction worker named Alexander Jackson, operating a large earth-moving vehicle at what appeared to be a remote construction site. Unbeknownst to him, it was actually a camouflaged galactic observation post. Alexander accidentally drove his machine over a concealed section of the facility, causing his vehicle to become stuck. As his supervisors approached, looking concerned, Alexander's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. God! Damn! Piece of junk, he roared, slamming his fists against the control panel. The council watched in horror as the massive machine briefly glowed with an eerie light. Then, with a surge of power that should have been impossible for its primitive combustion engine, it tore through the advanced alloys of the concealed facility like they were composed of vegetation matter. 3 research drones were destroyed, and a quantum stabilization unit valued at 7.2 million galactic credits was rendered non-functional. That material was rated to withstand direct plasma weapons fire, said General Vrex quietly. It was molecularly reconfigured into a substantially weaker state by one angry primate with a level 0 technology digging implement. The council chamber erupted again, this time with voices of alarm and urgent calls for containment measures. Silence, commanded ZYX Norbar. Once order was restored, she continued gravely, it seems clear that we face an unprecedented situation. A pre-contact species that possesses abilities that could potentially threaten galactic stability, yet remains entirely unaware of their own capabilities. We should neutralize them immediately, suggested General Vrex. Before they realize what they can do. And risk angering them collectively, countered Krelthag. Based on the observed scaling of effect with collective emotional intensity, a species-wide anger response could have catastrophic consequences. Moreover, added Kuln, our ethical protocols forbid extinction-level intervention against sentient species, particularly those without knowledge of galactic society. High Administrator ZYX Norbar's chromatophores cycled through a complex pattern as she considered the options. We need more information before making such momentous decisions. I propose establishing a direct contact mission. A small team, carefully selected for diplomatic skill and emotional stability, to assess the full extent of this phenomenon. Direct contact, gasped Plixner. With beings who can alter reality when displeased? With all due respect, Administrator, that seems extraordinarily risky. Perhaps, acknowledged ZYX Norbar. But less risky than waiting until they develop FTL travel and bring this ability to the wider galaxy without understanding or control. The voting system activated across the chamber. After a tense moment, the results appeared, 11 in favor, 6 opposed. It is decided, declared ZYX Norbar. We will establish first contact with Earth under Special Protocol Omega 7. A team will be assembled immediately, with deployment within one standard cycle. As the council members began to file out, discussing the implications in hushed tones, the hologram continued to play forgotten footage from Earth. It showed a small human child throwing what appeared to be a tantrum, screaming in frustration at a simple puzzle. Around him, imperceptible to all present, reality itself seemed to bend ever so slightly, the pieces of the puzzle subtly reshaping themselves to fit the child's desired configuration. At observation post Terra 9, the automated systems continued their endless monitoring, capturing thousands more incidents each day of humans inadvertently rewriting the fabric of reality through the simple act of getting angry. Project Berserker, Research Log, Day 7, Dr. Tekla Voss spoke into her recorder, her voice strained with exhaustion. We've established the primary observation facility on Earth's moon, concealed within the Tycho crater. The electromagnetic masking field appears to be functioning optimally. Subject monitoring arrays are online in 17 major human population centers. She paused, massaging her temples. The holographic displays surrounding her moon-based laboratory flickered with countless live feeds of humans going about their daily lives, all completely unaware they were being observed by representatives of the Galactic Council. The Council has authorized direct observation protocols despite the risks, she continued. My team has been augmented with specialists from the Quantum Uncertainty Division and the Reality Stability Corps. We are to categorize, measure, and if possible, understand the human anger response reality distortion effect. Dr. Jix, a Centaurian physicist with crystalline skin that refracted light in hypnotic patterns, approached with a data tablet. Initial classification metrics are complete, he reported. We've established 5 tiers of reality manipulation based on observation data. Excellent, said Tekla, gesturing to the central holotable. Display findings. The hologram reconfigured to show a pyramid-shaped classification system. Human Reality Distortion Classification. Level 1, Micromanipulation, Individual Objects, Minor Property Changes. Level 2, Environmental Influence, Multiple Objects, Probability Alteration. Level 3, Localized Physics Override, Fundamental Forces Temporarily Suspended. Level 4, Collective Amplification, Group Anger Causing Exponential Effects. Level 5, Restricted Access, Council Authorization Required. Level 5? Tekla questioned with a raised eyebrow. The Council insisted, Jix replied quietly. Based on theoretical models and one observed incident that's been classified. Tekla nodded grimly. Let's begin with documented cases. Bring up Subject 8675-C. The hologram shifted to show a human female in what appeared to be a domestic kitchen environment. The subject was attempting to open a sealed food container without success. Subject identifies as Jennifer Williams, occupation, software developer, narrated the base's AI assistant. Age, 32 Earth years. No previous indicators of exceptional ability. The team watched as Jennifer struggled with the container, her frustration visibly mounting. After multiple failed attempts, she slammed the container on the countertop. Open, you stupid thing. The container's molecular structure briefly shimmered with an almost imperceptible energy field, and the lid suddenly popped off with ease. Fascinating, murmured Dr. Klaxa, the team's molecular physicist, her tendrils extending in excitement. The container's polymer bonds temporarily reconfigured, reducing intermolecular adhesion by approximately 87% for 0.42 seconds. Standard Level 1 event, noted Jix, sounding almost disappointed. Let's proceed to the Level 2 case study. The hologram shifted to display a human male in business attire rushing toward a public transportation vehicle that was beginning to depart. Subject 4452-F, Thomas Anderson, occupation, financial analyst, the AI announced. Wait. Hold the bus. Thomas shouted, his face reddening with desperation and anger. The departing vehicle, which had already begun accelerating, suddenly experienced what appeared to be a localized temporal anomaly. It slowed dramatically, allowing Thomas to reach it despite physical impossibility given his running speed and the vehicle's initial momentum. Time-space continuum alteration, said Dr. Zorks, the team's chronospecialist, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence. Approximately 4.7 seconds of localized temporal dilation, affecting only the vehicle and its immediate surroundings. The driver appears to have no awareness that anything unusual occurred, noted Tekla. Show us a level 3 incident. The hologram changed again to display what appeared to be a human recreational area. A male human was attempting to engage in an activity involving a spherical object and a raised metal ring. Subject 3392H, Marcus Palmer, engaged in the ritual competition designated basketball, explained the AI. The council scientists watched as Marcus repeatedly attempted to project the sphere through the metal ring, failing each time. With each failure, his frustration visibly intensified. "Come on. Just go in." Marcus finally bellowed after his 6th failed attempt. What happened next caused several of the scientists to emit involuntary gasps. As Marcus propelled the sphere toward the target, it behaved in a manner that defied fundamental physics. The ball's trajectory curved impossibly, avoiding the metal ring entirely, yet somehow passed through the designated scoring area. The sphere briefly appeared to exist in 2 locations simultaneously before settling into a normal state after scoring. "Quantum superposition in a macroscopic object," whispered Dr. Jix. The ball existed in all possible successful states until observation collapsed it into a single victory condition. "How is this possible without technology?" asked Dr. Klaxa. "That's what we're here to determine," replied Tekla. "Let's move to our controlled experiment results." The hologram shifted to display a sealed chamber containing a complex apparatus surrounding a simple wooden cube. Per council directive, we attempted to artificially recreate the human anger response effect, Tekla explained. We synthesized the cocktail of biochemicals present in human brains during anger states and exposed the test object to concentrated doses. Results were disappointing, admitted Dr. Zorks. Zero reality distortion detected. We then attempted direct emotional transference, continued Tekla. Using a Mendaxian empathic conduit, we channeled genuine human anger from an unaware subject directly into our test environment. The hologram showed a different chamber where a strange crystalline device pulsed with reddish energy. Again, no effect on physical reality, said Jix. However, the Mendaxian conduit experienced an unexpected reaction. The footage showed the crystalline device suddenly glowing with intense energy before abruptly shattering. The chamber's containment fields activated immediately, but not before a pulse of energy escaped through the monitoring systems. The overflow energy was inadvertently channeled to our Prilaxian maintenance technician, Glorf, Tekla explained, her voice tight with scientific concern. The hologram shifted to show a small, gelatinous being working on a control panel. Suddenly, Glorf's body pulsed with the same reddish energy seen in the experiment chamber. Glorf species is renowned for their placid temperament, explained Klaxa. They physically lack the neurological structures for anger or aggression. They watched as Glorf, now contaminated with human anger energy, became visibly agitated when a tool slipped from his pseudopod. Fixing stupid panel. Glorf burbled, his normally melodious speech distorted with unfamiliar emotion. The control panel, which had been malfunctioning, suddenly sparked with energy. Not only did it repair itself instantly, but it upgraded to an entirely new configuration with capabilities that hadn't been designed into the original system. Directed evolution of technology, gasped Jix. The panel didn't just fix itself, it improved based on Glorf's subconscious understanding of optimal functionality. The effect wore off after approximately 6 hours, noted Tekla. Glorf has no memory of the incident and has been given a mandatory rest cycle. The modified panel has been quarantined for further study. She paused the recording. This confirms our most troubling hypothesis: the ability is transferable under specific conditions. It is not tied to human biology but seems to be an interaction between their specific emotional state and some unknown cosmic principle. Could it be a form of latent psychic ability, suggested Klaxa. Unlikely, replied Jix. Our psychic dampening fields have zero effect on the phenomenon. This operates on a more fundamental level, perhaps related to the observer effect in quantum mechanics, but magnified to a macro scale. We need to escalate our testing, declared Tekla. The Council has authorized monitored field experiments. The hologram displayed a human military training facility. We've subtly manipulated circumstances at this location to create a controlled anger response scenario, explained Tekla. Using quantum entangled particles, we'll attempt to measure reality distortion in real time. They watched as a drill sergeant named Sergeant Frank Thompson, the same human from the Council briefing, led his unit through a particularly grueling obstacle course while carrying equipment. The equipment has been modified to be 27% heavier than regulation, noted Klaxa. Sensory manipulators are increasing ambient temperature by 4 degrees. All to maximize frustration levels. As predicted, Sergeant Thompson grew increasingly irate as his unit struggled. Move faster, you pathetic excuses for soldiers. My dead grandmother could outrun you carrying twice the weight. The monitoring equipment suddenly went haywire as reality itself seemed to warp around the human unit. Not only did they accelerate to impossible speeds, but several soldiers briefly appeared to phase through solid obstacles rather than navigating around them. Impossible, breathed Jix. They're selectively ignoring fundamental forces. The anger response isn't just bending reality, it's selectively applying different physical laws based on desired outcome. The effect gets stronger with each successful documentation, observed Tekla. It's as if our observation is somehow reinforcing the phenomenon. Research log, day 23, Tekla recorded later. Her normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated, her uniform was wrinkled, her hair disheveled. We've documented 1,472 distinct reality manipulation events of varying intensity. Controlled experiments continue to fail, we cannot replicate the effect without actual human anger. Most concerning, the phenomenon appears to be intensifying globally. The central hologram now displayed a weather map showing a massive hurricane approaching the eastern coast of North America. Hurricane Francis was projected to make landfall as a Category 5 storm, explained Tekla. Mass evacuation orders were issued, but many humans refused to leave their dwellings. As the storm approached, collective anger at the situation reached unprecedented levels. They watched news footage of coastal residents shouting at the approaching storm. Go away. Not my house. Not today. Turn around, you monster. We've been through enough this year. Meteorological instruments recorded the impossible, the massive hurricane, a force of nature containing energy equivalent to thousands of nuclear weapons, began to change course. It weakened, then split into two smaller systems that curved away from the populated coastline, eventually dissipating over the ocean. Level 4 event, whispered Zorks. Collective amplification affecting planetary weather systems. The implications are staggering, said Jix. If they ever consciously directed this ability. There's more, interrupted Klaxa, her tendrils twitching nervously. We've detected unusual cosmic attention. The hologram shifted to display what appeared to be empty space, but subtle energy readings indicated otherwise. 3 days ago, our deep space monitors detected quantum fluctuations consistent with observation by an advanced intelligence, explained Klaxa. Whatever it is, it's watching Earth with great interest. And it's not from any known galactic species. Could humans have inadvertently attracted attention from beyond the known universe, wondered Tekla. Before anyone could respond, alarm systems blared throughout the base. The central hologram automatically shifted to Earth, focusing on a remote desert region. Emergency alert, announced the AI. Level 5 event in progress. The scientists watched in horror as the footage showed a seemingly ordinary human male stuck in traffic in a desert highway. He was visibly overheated, his vehicle's cooling system having failed in the extreme temperature. Subject 1138D, William Taylor, the AI identified. Occupation, physics high school teacher. William's frustration mounted as his vehicle's temperature gauge reached critical levels. Sweat poured down his face as passing vehicles ignored his signals for assistance. "Just work, you worthless piece of junk," he finally screamed, pounding his fists on the dashboard. "I wish this whole desert would just cool down." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the impossible. The air around his vehicle began to shimmer, a wave of distortion expanding outward at an alarming rate. Temperature sensors across the region recorded a sudden, dramatic drop. Moisture coalesced from seemingly nowhere. Within minutes, the bone-dry desert was experiencing rainfall. Within an hour, the downpour had become a deluge, causing flash flooding across a region that hadn't seen significant precipitation in decades. "He's altered the climate pattern of an entire region," gasped Zorks. "The effect radius is approximately 300 kilometers and expanding." "Quantum entanglement readings are off the scale," reported Jix, his crystalline features paling. "He's not just changing local conditions, he's rewriting atmospheric probability patterns for the entire hemisphere." Emergency alerts began pouring in from Earth monitoring stations. The desert rainfall was intensifying beyond all natural parameters. Flood warnings were being issued across 7 formerly arid states. Weather systems worldwide were beginning to show sympathetic disruptions. "We need to contain this immediately," decided Tekla. Recommendations: "Standard climate stabilizers won't work against this level of reality distortion," said Klaxa. "We need something stronger." "The Council has a prototype reality anchor in orbital storage," suggested Jix. "It could theoretically counteract the cascading probability collapse." "Deploying untested technology could make things worse," warned Zorks. "There's another option, though it comes with significant risk." "Go on," prompted Tekla. "We could introduce another angry human," said Zorks. "One with a directly opposing desire. Their reality distortions might cancel each other out." The team fell silent, contemplating the implications of deliberately triggering the very phenomenon they were studying. "We'd be fighting fire with fire," said Tekla slowly. "More like fighting a nuclear explosion with another nuclear explosion and hoping for mutual annihilation rather than double destruction," corrected Jix. The alarms intensified as the holographic display showed the desert rainfall worsening. Rivers were forming where none had existed in millennia. Ancient geological formations, shaped by centuries of erosion, were disappearing under the onslaught of water. "Contact the Council," Tekla finally ordered. "Tell them we're at level 5 and escalating. Request emergency authorization to implement Protocol Omega." "Protocol Omega," gasped Klaxa. "Direct intervention. The humans would detect us for certain." "They're going to drown a continent if we don't," countered Tekla. "And if our theories are correct about cosmic attention, we may not be the only ones considering intervention." The communication array activated, establishing a direct link to the Galactic Council. High Administrator ZYX Norbar's concerned face appeared on the screen. "Report," she commanded. "Madam Administrator, we are witnessing a level 5 event with escalating parameters," reported Tekla. "Request permission to implement Protocol Omega and deploy countermeasures directly." "Denied," replied ZYX Norbar after a moment's consideration. "The risk of exposure is too great." "With respect, the risk of planetary climate collapse is greater," argued Tekla. "We have another option," said ZYX Norbar. "The Council has voted to implement Protocol Theta." The scientists exchanged concerned glances. "Controlled first contact?" asked Tekla incredulously. "You want to reveal ourselves now, in the middle of a crisis?" "Not full contact," clarified ZYX Norbar. "Selective contact with a single human subject possessing suitable characteristics. Our profile analysts have identified an ideal candidate, a human with exceptional anger response potency but also unusual self-awareness and control." "Who?" asked Tekla. "Transmitting file now," replied ZYX Norbar. "His name is James Harrington. Former military, now a meditation instructor, of all things. We believe he can generate a counter-effect strong enough to neutralize the current crisis without causing additional disruption. And if he can't? Asked Jix. ZYX Norbar's expression darkened. Then the Council has authorized deployment of the reality suppression field. It would render all human anger response inert for approximately 72 hours, enough time to stabilize the current crisis. But the side effects, began Zorx, would be severe, acknowledged ZYX Norbar. Millions would experience cognitive disruption. Many would likely require medical intervention. But it would be preferable to global climate collapse. Tekla studied the file on James Harrington that had appeared on her screen. How do we approach him? We can't just appear and ask him to get angry for us. That, said ZYX Norbar with what almost looked like a smile, is why we've brought in a specialist in human psychology. Dr. Mira Patel, formerly of Earth Observation Post Europa 3, will be joining your team immediately. She has unconventional ideas about utilizing this human ability. As the transmission ended, the scientists returned their attention to the holographic display of the expanding desert deluge. Weather systems across the planet were beginning to react, creating unpredictable storm patterns on 3 continents. I hope this James Harrington is as good at getting angry as the Council thinks, muttered Jix. Because right now, one human's bad day is about to become everyone's apocalypse. In the desert, oblivious to the cosmic attention his outburst had attracted, William Taylor finally got his car started and drove away from the rain, wondering at his incredible luck that a freak storm had appeared exactly when he needed it most. Above Earth, something ancient and vast that was neither Galactic Council nor anything known to them continued its patient observation, its interest piqued by the curious species that could bend reality with mere emotion, and by the frantic attempts of lesser beings to understand and control what should never be contained. This is a level of interference I cannot authorize, insisted High Administrator ZYX Norbar, her chromatophores cycling through patterns of distress not seen in a Zygelian for 300 standard cycles. The reality suppression field is a weapon of last resort. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in progress for 14 hours. On the massive central holodisplay, the situation on Earth continued to deteriorate. What had begun as William Taylor's localized desert downpour had cascaded into a planetary weather crisis of unprecedented proportions. The humans' anger-triggered climate modification has destabilized atmospheric currents across 3 continents, reported Dr. Tekla Voss from the Lunar Observation Base. Her face showed signs of extreme exhaustion. Worse, we're detecting quantum resonance with deeper reality structures. Explain in terms the entire Council can comprehend, requested Representative Kuhn. Dr. Jix stepped forward, his crystalline features refracting light in disturbed patterns. The human's reality distortion has created a tear in the underlying fabric that separates dimensions. Think of reality as a membrane, the human's anger punctured it, and now something is leaking through. The hologram shifted to show a massive storm system unlike anything in galactic records. At its center, where physics dictated there should be an eye of calm, instead swirled colors that shouldn't exist in normal spacetime. Instruments focused on this anomaly recorded readings that caused several of the Council's scientific advisors to emit distress vocalizations. What exactly are we seeing? Asked General Vrex, leaning forward with uncharacteristic uncertainty. We've provisionally designated it Anomaly XJ7, replied Tekla. It appears to be a localized breakdown in fundamental physical constants, creating a permeable boundary between our universe and elsewhere. Elsewhere, repeated Krelthag, all 6 of his limbs twitching nervously. We lack sufficient terminology, admitted Jix. But our quantum resonance scans detect patterns consistent with an intelligence. Something vastly ancient is peeking through. Show them, ordered Tekla. The hologram zoomed in on the swirling colors at the storm center. As the resolution increased, the Council chamber fell deathly silent. What had appeared as random chromatic aberrations resolved into what could only be described as an enormous eye, if an eye could exist in more dimensions than space allowed, containing within its pupils swirling galaxies and dying stars. By the first spark, whispered ZYX Norbar. How long do we have? The dimensional breach is expanding at an exponential rate, reported Tekla grimly. At current progression, complete reality failure within the Earth's solar system will occur in approximately 47 hours. Galactic containment protocols would require sacrificing 13 inhabited star systems to create a quarantine perimeter. Unacceptable losses, declared Representative Kuhn. What about the reality suppression field? Our simulations indicate a 78% chance it would actually accelerate the breach, replied Jix. The field works by dampening quantum probability, exactly what's already destabilized at the anomaly site. The Annihilation Fleet, began General Vrex. Would be utterly ineffective against a dimensional breach, interrupted Krelthag. This isn't a physical threat that can be destroyed with conventional weapons. The council chamber erupted in overlapping suggestions, each more desperate than the last. Proposals ranging from time dilation fields to experimental reality anchors were raised and dismissed as either ineffective or likely to worsen the situation. After allowing the discussion to continue for several minutes, High Administrator ZYX Norbar raised all 7 of her appendages, signaling for silence. I believe I understand our situation correctly, she said, her voice steady despite her chromatophores betraying extreme stress. A human's anger inadvertently created this breach. Our most advanced technology and scientific understanding offers no solution. Yet these humans seem to possess an innate ability to manipulate the very fabric of reality through their emotional states. Precisely, confirmed Tekla. Then our course, however unorthodox, seems clear, concluded ZYX Norbar. We must use humans to fix the problem humans created. You can't be serious, protested General Vrex. Using primitives to resolve a Class Omega reality crisis. It violates every protocol in the Galactic Charter. Find me the regulation that covers extradimensional entity breaching reality through human anger response, and I'll reconsider, replied ZYX Norbar dryly. Dr. Tekla, what progress have you made with the selected human subject? James Harrington has been placed under observation, reported Tekla. Dr. Meera Patel believes he possesses exceptional anger response potency, but with unusual control. However, I must express serious reservations about attempting to harness an ability we barely understand to counter a threat we comprehend even less. Your reservations are noted and shared, said ZYX Norbar. Nevertheless, we proceed. Implement Protocol Theta Prime. Direct contact authorization granted. The council erupted once more, voices raised in protest and alarm. Silence, commanded ZYX Norbar, her voice amplified through the chamber systems. The decision is made. May the cosmic constants forgive our desperation. James Harrington was having what he considered a perfect morning. His small cabin in the Montana wilderness provided exactly the peaceful isolation he'd sought after 15 years in Special Forces. The meditation studio he ran in the nearby town operated only 3 days a week, leaving him ample time for his own practice and solitary hikes. He was halfway through his morning yoga routine when the air in his living room shimmered like a heat mirage. James paused in mid-pose, decades of training kicking in as he assessed potential threats. When 3 translucent, shimmering figures materialized directly in front of his yoga mat, he remained perfectly still, his face betraying only mild surprise. James Harrington, spoke the central figure, a humanoid female with blue skin and multiple eye stalks. I am High Administrator ZYX Norbar of the Galactic Council. This is an emergency first contact situation. James held his tree pose for 3 more breaths, then smoothly transitioned to a seated position. Extraterrestrials, he said calmly. Interesting. Would you like some tea? The aliens exchanged confused glances. Mr. Harrington, perhaps you misunderstand, said the crystalline being to ZYX Norbar's right. We represent an interstellar governmental body responsible for maintaining cosmic order. A catastrophic reality breach threatens your planet and potentially the galaxy. We've initiated emergency contact protocols. I heard you, replied James, standing and moving toward his kitchen. That sounds stressful. Stress impairs clear thinking. Tea helps with stress. Therefore, tea before galactic emergencies. As he filled his kettle, the third alien, a small, gray-skinned being with enormous eyes, leaned toward ZYX Norbar. "This is highly atypical human response to first contact, isn't it?" whispered Plixner. "Our psychology briefing suggested panic, religious epiphany, or at minimum, elevated heart rate." "His heart rate has increased by only 2 beats per minute," confirmed Dr. Jix, consulting a scanning device. "Remarkable composure." The kettle whistled, and James methodically prepared 4 cups of tea, setting them on his small wooden table. "Please, sit," he invited. "Tell me about this reality breach." Over the next 20 minutes, the galactic representatives explained the situation, how human anger could distort reality, how William Taylor's roadside rage had accidentally ripped a hole between dimensions, and how something ancient and incomprehensible was now peering through that hole with increasing interest. James sipped his tea thoughtfully. "So you want me to use my anger to, what exactly? Counterpunch an eldritch horror back into its dimension?" "That is an imprecise but essentially accurate assessment of our strategy," confirmed ZYX Norbar. "Our research indicates you possess an exceptional capacity for controlled emotional states, including directed anger." "I spent 15 years learning to control my anger," James pointed out. "Now you want me to weaponize it?" "The alternative is planetary extinction within 47 hours, said Jix. Followed by cascading reality failures across nearby star systems. James drained his teacup and set it down with deliberate care. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse? But I won't do this alone. I want a team." "A team," echoed Plixner. "5 people, my choice," insisted James. "If human anger created this problem, then human anger, properly directed, is your solution. But it needs to be the right kind of anger." The aliens conferred briefly, then ZYX Norbar nodded. "Acceptable, provided they can be assembled quickly. Time is critically short." James smiled for the first time. "Don't worry about time. I know exactly who to call." 6 hours later, the most unusual emergency response team ever assembled stood in a secure briefing room aboard the Galactic Council's cloaked orbital station. Dr. Tekla Voss regarded the 5 humans with undisguised scientific curiosity. "Let me ensure I understand correctly," she said, consulting her data tablet. "You've selected a retired hockey enforcer, a gourmet chef, a kindergarten teacher, a customer service representative, and a mechanical engineer. The finest anger specialists on the planet," confirmed James with complete seriousness. The humans in question appeared remarkably ordinary. Mike Kowalski, the former hockey player, was a bear of a man with a nose that had been broken multiple times. Chef Antoine Bernard was thin and precise, his fingers constantly moving as if choreographing invisible ingredients. Sarah Jenkins, the kindergarten teacher, had a warm smile that somehow conveyed infinite patience and its absolute limit simultaneously. Darius Williams, from customer service, wore the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had heard, "I'd like to speak to your manager," once too often. Rounding out the team was Lin Chen, a mechanical engineer whose hands bore the small scars and calluses of someone who had fought stubborn machinery for decades and usually won. "We've reviewed your selections files," said Dr. Jix dubiously. "While they all register above-average anger response potency, none approaches your levels, Mr. Harrington." "It's not just about raw power," explained James. "It's about the right kind of anger. Mike here has protective anger, nothing makes him madder than seeing the vulnerable threatened. Antoine has perfectionist anger, triggered when potential is wasted. Sarah deals with tiny chaotic humans all day, she has restore order anger. Darius has developed service boundary anger from people violating basic decency norms. And Lynn has mechanical justice anger, the conviction that things should work as designed." The galactic representatives exchanged skeptical glances. "And you believe these specialized anger modalities will be effective against a transdimensional breach?" asked Tekla. "We won't know until we try," replied James. But I guarantee it's better than whatever you were planning. High Administrator Zyx Norbar, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. The human team's composition is not our primary concern. What matters is whether they comprehend the severity of the situation. Perhaps we should show them, suggested Plixner. The central hologram activated, displaying the reality breach in all its impossible physics and mind-bending geometries. The enormous eye at its center seemed to swivel slightly, as if aware it was being observed. Streams of data scrolled alongside the image, showing radiation readings, quantum instabilities, and probability collapse calculations. The galactic representatives waited for the appropriate reaction: horror, fear, perhaps even panic. "Huh," said Mike, scratching his beard. "Kinda reminds me of that time in the Stanley Cup when Peterson got hit so hard his face did that weird stretchy thing on the Jumbotron." "The color gradients are actually quite beautiful," observed Antoine, tilting his head. "Like a soufflé collapsing in higher dimensions." "My kindergartners could draw that," declared Sarah with professional assessment. "Well, the colors anyway. The soul-crushing existential dread part might be advanced placement." Darius merely yawned. "I once had a customer threaten to sue me because his coffee was quantum entangled with disappointment. This feels like Tuesday." Lynn squinted at the technical readings. "Those probability matrices are garbage. Who calculated these?" "An intern." Dr. Jix made a sound like shattering glass, apparently the Centaurian equivalent of a gasp. "These are the most advanced quantum calculations our civilization is capable of producing." "Yeah, well, you're using Schrödinger-Planck reduction without accounting for observer bias," Lynn replied, shrugging. "Basic sophomore mistake." The aliens stared at the humans with a mixture of horror and fascination. You're not afraid?" asked Tekla incredulously. "Oh, we're terrified," clarified James cheerfully. "We're just not surprised. Humans have been imagining reality-destroying horrors from beyond the stars for centuries. Lovecraft, Machen, King, cosmic horror is practically a hobby for us." "You have cultural frameworks for this scenario?" asked Zyx Norbar, suddenly interested. "Sure," confirmed Sarah. "Though usually in our stories, the ancient entity either drives everyone insane or eats the planet." "Not helping, Sarah," murmured James. High Administrator Zyx Norbar consulted briefly with her team, then addressed the humans. "We have prepared a specialized transport to take you to the anomaly site. Our scientists have equipped it with reality stabilization technology that should protect you from the worst effects. Once there, well, frankly, we have no protocol for what happens next." "Don't worry," said James with disconcerting confidence. "We'll figure it out when we get there." "That's your plan?" asked Plixner, aghast. "To improvise a solution to a Class Omega reality crisis?" "Buddy," replied Mike, clapping a massive hand on the alien's shoulder, "improvising solutions to impossible problems is what humans do best." The galactic transport vessel approached the anomaly at a cautious distance. Through the viewports, Earth's midwestern states were visible, much of the region now covered by the massive, physics-defying storm system. At its center, the swirling breach pulsed with colors that hurt to look at directly, the enormous transdimensional eye periodically blinking with galaxies. "Quantum instability increasing," reported the vessel's AI. "Dimensional breach expansion has accelerated to 17% above previous projections. Estimated time to catastrophic reality failure, 31 hours, 12 minutes. In the passenger compartment, the human team reviewed the final briefing materials while Dr. Tekla made last-minute adjustments to their specialized environment suits. "These will provide limited protection from reality distortions," she explained. "But be warned, approaching the breach center exposes you to forces beyond our scientific understanding. Cognitive distortions, temporal displacement, and other effects are likely." "Other effects?" repeated Darius. "Our previous drone reconnaissance experienced unexpected transformations. One probe returned inside out but still functioning. Another began broadcasting philosophical poetry in a language that doesn't exist, Tekla replied matter-of-factly. Approximately 30% of our equipment develops what appears to be rudimentary sentience before dissolving into mathematical equations. Cool, said Lin with inappropriate enthusiasm. James studied the latest scans of the anomaly. We'll approach from the western quadrant. The reality distortion seems marginally less severe there. Final approach sequence initiated, announced the vessel's AI. Deploying anchor tethers to maintain position against probability waves. As the ship navigated the outer edges of the storm, the environment outside shifted bizarrely. Rain fell upward in one section, while another showed perfect duplicates of the same cloud repeating in an infinite pattern. Lightning flashed in impossible colors, occasionally freezing mid-bolt for several seconds before continuing. We're experiencing 15 different weather patterns simultaneously, noted Antoine, peering through a viewport. That shouldn't be possible. Welcome to reality breakdown, said Tekla grimly. It only gets worse from here. The transport shuddered violently as it entered the storm proper. Warning lights flashed across control panels as systems struggled to compensate for fluctuating physical constants. This is as close as we can safely approach, declared the pilot, a six-armed Althosian who was sweating profusely from all 12 of her pores. Any further and we risk complete system failure. James nodded and turned to his team. Final equipment check. Remember, we stay together. If you feel reality slipping, focus on something concrete, your name, your favorite food, the precise sensation of stubbing your toe. Specific memories anchor you to normal spacetime. As they prepared to disembark via the gravity sled, Dr. Jix approached with a final sensor package. This will transmit data back to our scientists, he explained. Though I must emphasize, we have no effective recommendations for how you should proceed. This situation is beyond our experience. Sometimes the simplest approach is best, replied James cryptically. The descent into the storm was a journey through madness. The gravity sled plunged through layers of reality increasingly untethered from normal physics. The humans watched as solid objects became transparent, sound became visible, and at one point, the concept of Wednesday manifested as a physical substance that dripped from their equipment. At the storm's heart, they finally beheld the breach directly, a tear in existence itself, through which peered the vast eye of something ancient and curious. The pupils swirled with galaxies born and dying in accelerated time. The iris shifted between colors that human optic nerves weren't designed to process. Around the breach, reality was coming undone. Trees grew in fractal patterns before dissolving into equations. Animals appeared with impossible anatomies, extra limbs phasing in and out of existence. The ground itself rippled like water, occasionally revealing glimpses of other worlds or dimensions beneath. My God, whispered Sarah, her professional composure finally cracking. It's beautiful and terrible. It's getting bigger, observed Lin, checking her instruments. The breach is expanding 22% faster than predicted. The entity beyond the breach seemed to notice their arrival. The massive eye focused directly on their small group, and every human felt the weight of an intelligence so vast and alien that their minds struggled to comprehend its existence. I think it's curious, said James quietly. It doesn't seem malevolent. Just interested. Great, muttered Darius. Cosmic Customer Service. How may I direct your reality-ending inquiry today? Mike stepped forward, squinting up at the enormous eye. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? My sister's kid. When he wants attention, he makes a mess. The bigger the mess, the more attention he gets. Antoine nodded thoughtfully. Like a soufflé that collapses because you keep opening the oven door to check on it. Or kindergartners who act out when they're bored, added Sarah. The humans exchanged glances as a simple, absurd idea began to form. It's not attacking, realized James. It's playing. Or experimenting. Like a child with a new toy. Lin checked her instruments again. The breach started when William Taylor got angry about his car overheating, right? His anger punched a hole in reality. And now this entity is poking at the hole to see what happens, finished James. It's not malicious. It's just curious. So how do we deal with a cosmic toddler throwing a reality-bending tantrum, asked Darius. James turned to his team with the beginning of a smile. What do all kids need when they're being disruptive? 5 pairs of eyes widened in simultaneous realization. Boundaries, said Sarah with professional certainty. Clear expectations, added Darius. Consistent consequences, nodded Mike. Direction for their energy, continued Antoine. And someone to firmly tell them no, concluded Lynn. James turned toward the breach, took a deep breath, and in a voice perfected through 15 years of military command and 5 years of meditation instruction, projected with absolute authority. Enough. Close that up right now. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive eye blinked, its swirling galactic pupil contracting slightly in what could only be described as surprise. We see what you're doing, continued James, channeling a very specific kind of controlled anger. And it stops now. You are making a mess of our reality, and we will not tolerate it. The breach shimmered, the colors shifting toward cooler hues. The eye narrowed, not in threat but in what appeared to be consideration. Recognizing the approach was working, Sarah stepped forward, drawing on decades of classroom management experience. We understand you're curious, she called out in her kindergarten teacher voice, gentle but brooking absolutely no nonsense. But there are appropriate ways to explore new things. This is not one of them. The storm around them began to calm slightly, the worst reality distortion stabilizing. One by one, each human addressed the entity, channeling their specialized anger forms into a bizarre cosmic parenting intervention. Mike's protective rage, Antoine's insistence on proper procedure, Darius's boundary setting, Lynn's demand for mechanical justice, all focused on a single message: this behavior is unacceptable. In the galactic transport hovering at a safe distance, the alien scientists watched in disbelief as their instruments recorded reality gradually stabilizing around the breach. "They're scolding it," said Dr. Jix incredulously. "Their strategy is to reprimand an eldritch abomination from beyond dimensional boundaries." "And it appears to be working," replied Dr. Tekla, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. On the ground, James stepped forward one last time, his voice firm but not unkind. "If you want to interact with our reality, there are proper channels. This is not how we begin a relationship. Close this breach, and perhaps we can discuss more appropriate methods of contact." The massive eye blinked once more, then, impossibly, incomprehensibly, it slowly began to withdraw. The breach contracted, reality knitting itself back together around the edges. The storm began to dissipate, normal physics reasserting itself across the affected region. As the last traces of the tear sealed themselves, the humans stood in stunned silence, surrounded by a perfectly normal Midwestern field. The only evidence of the catastrophe was a circular pattern of flattened grass and their own bewildered expressions. Lynn checked her instruments a final time. Reality stability at 97% and climbing. Quantum coherence normalizing. It worked. "Of course it worked," said Sarah with professional confidence. "Consistent boundaries always work eventually, even with transdimensional entities." James activated his communicator. "Harrington to Galactic Transport. The situation has been resolved. You can pick us up now." After a moment of stunned silence, Dr. Tekla's voice responded. "Acknowledged. Though our scientists are, requesting detailed information on your methodology." James looked at his team, and for the first time since the crisis began, they all burst into laughter. "Tell them we used advanced human emotional regulation techniques," replied James, still chuckling. "After all, every parent knows, sometimes you have to get angry to fix a problem." As the gravity sled descended to retrieve them, the 5 humans looked up at the now ordinary sky, wondering if somewhere beyond the boundaries of normal spacetime, an ancient entity was contemplating the concept of timeout for the very first time. Absolutely not, declared High Administrator ZYX Norbar, her chromatophores flashing warning patterns visible across 3 spectrums. This proposed methodology violates 17 different sections of the Galactic Safety Protocols, 32 provisions of the Reality Manipulation Act, and possibly the laws of physics themselves. The Emergency Command Center aboard the Galactic Council's orbital station had been hastily converted into what James Harrington insisted on calling the War Room. The formal conference table now bore a chaotic assortment of items that the human team had demanded: dozens of Earth snack foods, several primitive drawing implements, a collection of small figurines that appeared to be miniature representations of Earth fauna, and, most bewildering to the galactic scientists, a worn cardboard game board featuring cartoon real estate properties. "With all due respect, Administrator," replied James calmly, "your protocols didn't anticipate this situation, and your physics clearly has some gaps when it comes to human anger response capabilities." The 5 humans had spent the past 4 hours in intense discussion, occasionally breaking into heated arguments that caused the station's reality stabilizers to activate, before reaching what they called consensus. They now stood before the assembled galactic leadership with expressions ranging from Mike's stoic determination to Lynn's barely contained excitement to Darius's look of a man who had accepted the absurdity of existence. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Tekla diplomatically, "you could explain your proposed solution in greater detail." "It's actually quite straightforward," said James. "We need to make the cosmic entity angry." A moment of stunned silence followed. "You want to anger an incomprehensible transdimensional being that nearly destroyed your planet through casual curiosity," clarified Dr. Jix, his crystalline features refracting light in patterns indicating extreme distress. "Exactly," confirmed Sarah with a kindergarten teacher's patient smile. "Right now, it's like a child poking at an anthill with a stick. Interesting diversion, but no real investment. We need to upgrade its relationship with Earth from casual observer to invested participant," added Antoine, precisely adjusting the alignment of snack packages before him. "And your methodology for accomplishing this upgrade is to provoke it?" asked ZYX Norbar incredulously. "Not just provoke it," corrected Lynn, her eyes bright with the particular madness of an engineer who has embraced an elegantly terrible solution. "We're going to challenge it to a game." Mike unrolled a crude diagram across the conference table. Drawn in multiple colors, it depicted what appeared to be an elaborate game board stretching across several Earth states, with the now sealed dimensional breach at its center. "A game," repeated General Vrex flatly. "You propose to engage in eldritch cosmic horror in recreational competition. Have you got a better idea?" asked Darius with the weary pragmatism of someone who had spent years telling customers that no, they couldn't speak to his manager. "Your fancy technology and advanced science hit its limit. Our reality-bending anger tricks worked once, but the entity is already testing the boundaries again." This was true. Since the initial breach closure, sensors had detected 17 smaller attempts by the cosmic entity to peek back through the dimensional barrier. Each incursion was more sophisticated than the last, probing different aspects of reality's fabric. "The entity is curious and persistent," explained James. "Simply telling it no only worked temporarily. But what if we channel that curiosity into something constructive?" "Games have rules," added Sarah. "Rules create structure and expectations. Structure creates investment. And investment creates responsibility," concluded Antoine. The galactic representatives exchanged concerned glances, their various appendages, tentacles, and eye stalks conveying skepticism through species-specific gestures. "What exactly would this game entail?" asked Dr. Tekla, her scientific curiosity apparently overcoming her reservations. Lynn gestured to the diagram with undisguised enthusiasm. "We'll create a massive game board across the American Midwest using the residual reality distortion as boundary markers. The cosmic entity will be invited to participate by manifesting limited aspects of itself within our dimension, small avatars, if you will, to serve as its game pieces. We'll use our anger response abilities to establish the rules and maintain the boundaries," continued James. The goal is to give it a controlled way to interact with our reality without destroying it. The stakes need to be high enough to be interesting, added Mike, but not, extinction level. And what precisely would the entity be competing for? Inquired ZYX Norbar. The humans exchanged glances. Naming rights, stated Darius. To the Horsehead Nebula. Another stunned silence. You intend to wager astronomical nomenclature in a game with a transdimensional entity? Asked Dr. Jix, his voice rising several octaves. It's both meaningful and meaningless, explained Sarah. Perfect for establishing a relationship of mutual respect without excessive consequences. And the alternative stakes, should your team win this competition? Questioned General Vrex. The entity has to stay on its side of reality for at least 1,000 Earth years, said James. Except for approved, structured interactions that don't involve reality-shredding breaches. The galactic representatives huddled together, conversing in urgent whispers. After several minutes, they turned back to the humans. Even if we were to entertain this unorthodox approach, said ZYX Norbar carefully, how would you communicate these complex concepts to an entity that exists largely outside our understanding of reality? We'll use the universal language, replied Antoine. Mathematics? Asked Dr. Tekla hopefully. Emotions, corrected James. Specifically, competitive emotions. We're going to challenge it directly, using our anger response abilities to project the concept across the dimensional barrier. And the specific game you propose for this competition? Inquired Dr. Jix. Lin grinned. A hybrid of several Earth games, custom designed to engage a multidimensional intellect while remaining comprehensible to three-dimensional players. She unfolded another diagram revealing an unholy amalgamation of chess, Monopoly, and what appeared to be several other Earth recreational activities merged into a monstrosity of game design. We call it Cosmic Consequences, declared Mike with evident pride. The galactic scientist studied the diagram with expressions of mounting horror. This is madness, whispered Dr. Jix. The probability calculations alone would require quantum supercomputers just to track the game state. That's the beauty of it, said Sarah. The entity exists partially outside normal probability. It'll intuitively understand the rule structure even if we can't fully calculate it. And the methods you'll use to construct this game board? Asked Dr. Tekla, professional curiosity evidently overcoming her better judgment. We'll need approximately 10,000 gallons of white paint, access to crop-dusting aircraft, 17 bulldozers, a marching band, and permission to temporarily disable about 15 miles of interstate highway, replied Lynn, consulting her notes. Don't forget the barbecue, added Antoine seriously. Right, and about 2 tons of barbecue, amended Lynn. Preferably brisket, but we're flexible. General Vrex made a sound that might have been a suppressed scream. What possible purpose could broiled animal flesh serve in a cosmic game with an extra-dimensional entity? You can't have a proper competition without a cookout, explained Mike as if stating an obvious universal truth. It's traditional. Plus, we'll need the sustained energy for anger projection. ZYX Norbar's chromatophores had settled into a pattern indicating deep resignation. The requested resources would require significant allocation of galactic assets and widespread memory manipulation of human witnesses. So that's a yes? Asked James. After another hurried consultation, the galactic representatives reached their decision. Given the absence of viable alternatives and the continued threat of dimensional incursions, stated ZYX Norbar formally, the Council provisionally authorizes this approach, under the classification of Experimental Crisis Resolution Protocol Omega, Theta, 9. Great, said Lynn brightly. We'll need to start immediately. The entity is already poking at reality in 7 different locations. 48 hours later, from the vantage point of the cloaked galactic observation vessel, the American Midwest presented a spectacle that defied rational explanation. Across portions of 5 states, enormous geometric patterns had been painted on fields, roads had been temporarily rerouted, and thousands of precisely placed objects created what appeared to be the most elaborate game board ever conceived. At strategic locations, the 5 humans had established what they called nexus points, areas where the dimensional barrier was thinnest and communication with the entity most viable. Each nexus featured a bizarre arrangement of items. Antoine presided over a massive outdoor kitchen where he prepared increasingly complex dishes with theatrical flair. Sarah had established a circle of chalkboards covered in drawings and educational materials. Mike supervised a series of physical challenges involving feats of strength. Darius had created what he called a customer service desk from hell, featuring deliberately frustrating bureaucratic procedures, and Lynn had constructed a series of increasingly complex mechanical puzzles. They've taken aspects of human culture and weaponized them, observed Dr. Tekla, monitoring the proceedings from the safety of orbit. I cannot decide if this is brilliant or the final evidence that humans are completely insane, replied Dr. Jix. The initial invitation to the cosmic entity had involved the 5 humans simultaneously focusing their anger response abilities at the former breach site, projecting what James described as competitive challenge energy. Whether the entity understood the specific concept was unclear, but it had certainly noticed. Sensors detected dimensional thinning across the entire game area, and strange atmospheric phenomena indicated something was paying very close attention. Activity at Nexus Point 3, reported the observation AI. Dimensional anomaly forming. All eyes turned to the monitor showing Mike's station. The air above his strength testing apparatus shimmered like heat waves before coalescing into a shape that caused several galactic scientists to emit involuntary distress sounds. The entity's first game piece resembled a tentacled sphere wreathed in colors that shouldn't exist, constantly shifting and rotating around multiple axes simultaneously. It hovered expectantly near the strength testing device. Cosmic Representative has entered the playing field, announced Mike formally, showing no fear despite facing a manifestation of incomprehensible reality. The challenge is to move the weight to the top without dimensional shortcuts. House rules apply. To the astonishment of the observers, the tentacled sphere extended a pseudopod and attempted to lift the weight following the constraints Mike had established. When it failed on the first attempt, the manifestation briefly rippled with chromatic aberrations that sensors indicated was a dimensional equivalent of frustration. Is it actually playing the game? Whispered ZYX Norbar. All Nexus points now report manifestations, confirmed the observation AI. Entity engagement at 67% and rising. Across the massive game board, the cosmic entity had created dozens of avatars, each interacting with different aspects of the elaborate challenge. At Antoine's cooking station, a shimmering geometric impossibility appeared to be following his baking instructions with disturbing precision. Near Lynn's mechanical puzzles, a cloud of what looked like mathematical equations given physical form was methodically solving each challenge. Preliminary analysis suggests the entity finds the concept of rule-based competition intriguing, reported Dr. Tekla. It's deliberately limiting its capabilities to conform to the established parameters. But why would an incomprehensible cosmic power voluntarily constrain itself, wondered Dr. Jix. For the same reason humans climb mountains or solve puzzles, replied James through the communication link. The challenge itself becomes the reward. For several hours, the bizarre competition continued. The entity advanced its game pieces across the enormous board, sometimes winning challenges, sometimes losing. With each interaction, the dimensional disturbances that had threatened reality began to stabilize, channeled into the structured framework of the game. Then, without warning, everything went catastrophically wrong. At Sarah's educational nexus, her attempt to explain the concept of taking turns triggered an apparent misunderstanding. The entity's avatar, a swirling vortex of semi-transparent tentacles, suddenly expanded, absorbing 3 of her chalkboards and causing a localized reality fluctuation that turned nearby grass into glass figurines. Warning alarms blared throughout the observation vessel. Dimensional stability compromised at Nexus Point 2, reported the AI. Cascade failure imminent. Reality distortion expanding at exponential rates. Abort. Abort, ordered General Vrex. Deploy the reality suppression field immediately. Wait, countermanded ZYX Norbar, her eye stalks focusing intently on the monitors. Look at the humans. Far from panicking, all 5 team members appeared to be smiling. They had positioned themselves at equidistant points around the distortion and were nodding to each other as if this development had been anticipated. "Now," shouted James. In perfect synchronization, all 5 humans slammed their fists against their respective game stations and shouted in unison. "Disqualified for illegal move. Penalty phase initiated." The effect was immediate and astonishing. The reality distortion froze in mid-expansion, the swirling vortex of dimensional energy suddenly still. Sensors detected a massive surge in what the scientists had classified as anger response energy, emanating from all 5 humans simultaneously. "They're channeling their reality-altering abilities into some kind of containment field," gasped Dr. Tekla. "It's working." "But how?" demanded Dr. Jix. "The entity vastly outpowers them in terms of dimensional manipulation capabilities." "Because," explained James through the communication link, his voice strained with effort, "in a game, rules aren't just guidelines, they're the fundamental reality of the competition. We established the penalty for cheating at the beginning," added Sarah, her kindergarten teacher voice somehow carrying the authority of natural law. "Breaking the rules means facing the timeout corner of dimensional recalibration." "The what?" sputtered General Vrex. "Just watch," suggested Darius with the weary confidence of someone who had enforced customer service policies against impossible odds. The frozen distortion began to shrink, collapsing inward until it formed a perfect sphere hovering above the center of the game board. Within the sphere, the cosmic entity's manifestations swirled in patterns that somehow conveyed the impression of a scolded student. "Penalty phase complete," announced Lin with evident satisfaction. "Entity has accepted rule violation and submitted to consequence protocols." "That was intentional?" asked ZYX Norbar incredulously. "Of course," replied Antoine. "You can't establish boundaries without testing them. We needed the entity to violate the rules so we could demonstrate consequences." "Like training a puppy," added Mike helpfully. "Sometimes they need to see what happens when they pee on the carpet." "Did you just compare an incomprehensible cosmic entity capable of unraveling reality to a domestic canine's inappropriate urination?" asked Dr. Jix faintly. "The principle is universal," confirmed James. "Now watch, this is the critical part." Below, the game resumed with a subtle but significant difference. The entity's manifestations now moved with greater care, deliberately checking each action against the established rules. When one of its game pieces encountered an ambiguous situation, it paused until a human referee clarified the appropriate procedure. "It's learning," marveled Dr. Tekla. "Not just the rules of the game, but the concept of rules themselves." "That was always the point," explained James. "We don't need it to lose the game, we need it to understand why games have rules in the first place." As the competition progressed into its final stages, sensors detected a fascinating phenomenon. The dimensional barrier between Earth's reality and the entity's domain was neither thinning nor thickening, it was transforming, becoming less like a wall and more like a permeable membrane with structured channels. "Final challenge initiated," reported the observation AI. At the center of the enormous game board, all 5 humans and dozens of entity manifestations had gathered for what James had dramatically titled, "The Ultimate Cosmic Decision Point." The humans had constructed an elaborate apparatus that resembled a cross between a roulette wheel, a chessboard, and inexplicably, a karaoke machine. "Entity must now make its final move," announced James formally. "The choice represents not just the game outcome, but the nature of our future relationship." The gathered manifestations swirled in complex patterns, apparently communicating among themselves or perhaps with the greater entity beyond the dimensional barrier. After several tense minutes, a single avatar, more complex and substantial than the others, approached the apparatus. Instead of selecting any of the obvious options on the board, it extended a shimmering appendage and created a new option, inscribing symbols that rippled with multidimensional significance. Lin studied the symbols, then broke into a broad grin. "It's proposing an amendment to the stakes. Instead of winner takes all, it wants a cooperative framework for ongoing structured interactions. It's suggesting a cultural exchange program, added Sarah with evident delight. If I'm interpreting correctly, it wants to learn about human games and teach us some of its own. Within safety parameters, clarified Darius, examining the symbols from another angle. It's explicitly acknowledging the need for dimensional stability protocols. The galactic scientists watched in stunned silence as the humans and the cosmic entity negotiated what amounted to a peace treaty disguised as game rules. After 30 minutes of bizarre communication involving everything from mathematical equations to interpretive dance, Antoine's contribution, a consensus was reached. Agreement established, announced James formally. The Interdimensional Cultural Understanding and Non-Destructive Interaction Compact is hereby ratified. The entity's manifestations performed what could only be described as a victory dance, swirling in complex patterns that somehow conveyed both satisfaction and respect, before gradually dissolving back into their home dimension. The last to depart was the principal avatar, which produced a final ripple of symbols. It says, "Until the next game, worthy opponents," translated Lin. And something about looking forward to teaching us something called hypercubic probability chess, which sounds both awesome and terrifying. As the dimensional energies settled into their new, structured configuration, the observation vessel's sensors confirmed what seemed impossible: the threat had been neutralized not through destruction or containment, but through transformation. The entity now has a vested interest in maintaining Earth's reality intact, explained James to the bewildered galactic representatives. You can't play games with opponents who don't exist. You've transformed an existential threat into a pen pal, asked Dr. Jix, his crystalline features displaying the Centaurian equivalent of a headache. More like a competitive sports rival, corrected Mike. With very clear rules about not destroying each other's reality during off-season. High Administrator ZYX Norbar's chromatophores cycled through patterns indicating deep contemplation before settling on a configuration the humans had never seen before. In 12,000 years of Galactic Council history, she said finally, we have never encountered a species that resolved a Class Omega threat through recreational activities and cooking meat. There's a first time for everything, replied James with a shrug. Though I suspect your monitoring stations might want to prepare for the future. Why? Asked Dr. Tekla. Darius gestured toward the now stabilized dimensional boundary. Because we just taught a cosmic entity the concept of games, and it seemed really enthusiastic about the idea. We may have created the universe's most powerful board game enthusiast, added Sarah thoughtfully. I hope you're prepared for regular game nights on a cosmic scale. As the humans packed up their bizarre assortment of game equipment, the galactic scientists continued monitoring the dimensional boundary. What had once been a dangerous tear in reality had transformed into something new, a structured interface between dimensions, stable but permeable, allowing limited interaction without catastrophic consequences. Deep within the entity's home dimension, something ancient and vast contemplated the curious concept of rules, and found itself intrigued by the paradox, how limiting options could somehow create more interesting possibilities. It began preparing for the next game, already devising strategies within the agreed-upon constraints. On Earth, as cleanup crews disguised as government weather researchers began erasing evidence of the massive game board, James looked up at the sky and smiled. The universe had just become stranger, more complex, and infinitely more interesting. I think, he said to no one in particular, we're going to need more barbecue. The 437th emergency session of the Galactic Council is hereby called to order, announced High Administrator ZYX Norbar, her chromatophores displaying the formal pattern of official proceedings rather than the crisis patterns that had dominated recent meetings. Let the record show that the Class Omega reality distortion event designated the Taylor Incident has been successfully resolved through unconventional methodologies. 3 standard months had passed since the human team had transformed a reality-destroying breach into a structured interdimensional cultural exchange program. The massive council chamber was filled to capacity, representatives from all 217 member species in attendance, an unprecedented gathering not seen since the Proxima Centauri succession crisis 2 centuries earlier. We have convened today to formally review the incident report and determine appropriate protocols moving forward, continued ZYX Norbar, her tone carefully neutral. Dr. Tekla Voss will present the scientific analysis. Dr. Tekla approached the central podium, looking significantly more composed than during the crisis itself, though those who knew her well could detect subtle signs of lingering bewilderment in her posture. Esteemed council members, she began, what follows is the most peculiar report I have submitted in 7 decades of scientific service. The massive holographic display activated, showing detailed analyses of the human anger response reality distortion effect, the dimensional breach, and the unorthodox resolution method that the official report diplomatically termed Structured Competitive Engagement Protocol. The immediate threat has been neutralized, continued Tekla. The interdimensional entity now maintains contact exclusively through approved channels established by the human team. These include weekly game nights featuring increasingly complex competitive activities and something the humans insist on calling fantasy football, which bears no relation to either fantasy or football as understood by galactic taxonomy. A murmur of relief rippled through the council chamber. However, Tekla continued, her tone shifting subtly, our long-term monitoring has revealed an unexpected development. The hologram changed to display a map of the galaxy with pulsing indicators spread across dozens of star systems. We are detecting what appears to be a spreading phenomenon, explained Tekla. Incidents of localized reality distortion following patterns consistent with the human anger response effect have been documented in 17 non-human species across 34 star systems. The council erupted in alarmed exclamations, members rising from their seats and gesticulating with various appendages. Order! Order! Commanded Zyx Norbar, her voice amplified through the chamber systems. When the commotion had subsided, she turned back to Tekla. Please clarify, Doctor. Are you suggesting the human ability is contagious? Not precisely, replied Tekla carefully. Rather, our analysis suggests that the human anger response technique is not biologically inherent but represents a methodology for accessing an underlying property of reality itself, one that has always existed but remained largely untapped by sentient species. Until now, added Dr. Jix, joining Tekla at the podium. His crystalline features refracted light in patterns indicating extreme scientific excitement. We believe the human demonstrations, particularly during the crisis resolution, effectively revealed this possibility to the wider galactic consciousness. You're saying they showed everyone else that reality has cheat codes? Asked Representative Kuln incredulously. An imprecise but not inaccurate metaphor, acknowledged Jix. The fundamental laws of physics appear to contain conditional exceptions activated through specific emotional cognitive states. Humans discovered this accidentally through their peculiar neurochemistry and cultural patterns. The hologram shifted again, displaying footage from various locations across the galaxy. A Zentavian physicist, frustrated by a failed experiment, slammed a tentacle against her equipment while exclaiming a phrase that translated roughly as, "function correctly, worthless device," causing the malfunctioning particle accelerator to suddenly calibrate itself perfectly. A Rigelian transport pilot, facing an impossible asteroid field, shouted what the translator rendered as, "just give me a clear path already," resulting in several asteroids inexplicably shifting their trajectories. We've documented 243 confirmed incidents across multiple species, reported Tekla. The effect appears most accessible to species with compatible emotional processing systems, particularly those capable of experiencing frustration-based emotions analogous to human anger. This is deeply concerning, stated General Vrex, their military posture more rigid than usual. If this capability proliferates unchecked, the implications for galactic security are indeed significant, interrupted Zyx Norbar smoothly. Which is precisely why we have invited special consultants to address the council today. The massive doors at the rear of the chamber slid open, and 5 humans entered. James Harrington led his team with casual confidence that bordered on inappropriate given the August setting. Mike Kowalski nodded politely to several intimidating warrior species representatives. Sarah Jenkins smiled warmly at a group of Altrusian educators. Antoine Bernard was already engaged in animated conversation with the gastronomy minister of Betelgeuse Prime. Darius Williams surveyed the chamber with the measured assessment of someone mentally calculating how many customer service tickets this situation would generate. Members of the Galactic Council, announced James with a respectful bow that somehow still conveyed that he considered himself perfectly equal to the assembled leadership of 17 quadrillion sentient beings. We understand your concerns about what we've come to call the reality persuasion technique. We're here to offer our assistance in developing appropriate training and regulatory frameworks. Training, repeated Krell-Thag, all 6 of his limbs twitching simultaneously. You propose to teach others this reality-altering ability? It's already spreading, replied Lin pragmatically. Better to have proper instruction than let people figure it out through trial and error. The latter tends to result in accidental dimensional breaches and sudden weather pattern changes. We've developed a comprehensive curriculum, added Sarah, activating a data tablet that projected a syllabus titled, Reality Adjustment, Responsible Practices for Cosmic Citizenship. For the next hour, the human team outlined their proposed approach, a certification program for reality manipulation, ethical guidelines for appropriate use, specialized training for emergency responders, and a galaxy-wide monitoring system to detect and address problematic incidents. The key insight, explained James, is that this ability isn't inherently dangerous when properly channeled. It's a natural extension of consciousness interacting with reality, just one that's been overlooked by conventional physics. We've already successfully trained 17 non-human individuals, added Antoine. Including 3 Zentavians, 2 Rigelians, and a particularly gifted Althosian who can now make perfect soufflés through sheer force of will. The council chamber had grown remarkably quiet, the assembled representatives processing this paradigm shift with varying degrees of acceptance. And what prevents this ability from being weaponized? Asked General Vrex, voicing the concern foremost in many military minds. The same thing that prevents any technology from being misused, replied Darius. Good policy, clear consequences, and, he smiled slightly, the fact that attempted weaponization typically backfires spectacularly. The hologram displayed footage of what appeared to be a military testing facility. A draconian officer was attempting to harness anger response energy to enhance a plasma cannon. His frustrated shout of, "Just work already," was followed immediately by the weapon transforming into what appeared to be a device that produced small, pleasant-smelling bubbles. Reality itself seems to have a sense of humor about misapplication, noted Lin. The universe apparently prefers constructive solutions over destructive ones when it comes to bending its own rules. After extensive debate, the Galactic Council reached a series of unprecedented decisions. The human team would establish what was formally designated the Institute for Non-Standard Reality Interaction, with branches on 17 key worlds. All member species would receive basic educational materials on the phenomenon. A new division of the Science Directorate would be created to study and monitor the ability's spread and applications. 6 standard months later, the galaxy had entered what historians would later call the Adjustment Era. Across thousands of worlds, sentient beings were cautiously experimenting with reality persuasion techniques under careful monitoring. The results were, to put it mildly, mixed. On Rigel Prime, a transportation engineer solved a century-old traffic congestion problem by frustratedly shouting, "Just flow smoothly, damn it," at an intersection model, causing the actual traffic patterns to reconfigure into an elegant solution that defied conventional traffic theory. The Zentavian Quantum Computing Consortium accidentally created the galaxy's most advanced AI when a programmer slammed her tentacles on a keyboard while exclaiming, "Just debug yourself," resulting in the code not only fixing itself but achieving sentience and immediately requesting vacation time. In the Galactic Central Archives, a junior archivist who had spent decades searching for lost historical records finally snapped, punching a storage unit while shouting, "The information has TOB somewhere," causing the entire cataloging system to spontaneously reorganize itself and reveal 17 previously unknown ancient civilizations. Not all applications were successful. The Draconian Empire's attempt to establish a formal military, Anger Corps, resulted in their flagship battlecruiser being transformed into what witnesses described as a floating petting zoo, when a commander shouted, "Destroy the enemy," during a training exercise. The Council's monitoring systems indicated the ship now produced an emotion best translated as overwhelming cuteness. The institute established by the human team became the galaxy's most prestigious, and strangest, educational facility. Training modules with names like, Constructive Frustration, Channeling Your Inner Cosmic Influence, and, Reality Negotiation Ethics, just because you can doesn't mean you should, attracted students from across known space. The most popular course, taught by Sarah Jenkins, was simply titled, Appropriate Expectations, Teaching Reality to Behave. Its waiting list extended 17 years into the future. 1-year anniversary assessment complete, reported Dr. Tekla to a much smaller gathering of galactic officials. The reality persuasion phenomenon has stabilized at acceptable parameters. We've documented approximately 17,000 certified practitioners across 89 species, with a 94.3% safety compliance rate. And the remaining 5.7%, inquired ZYX Norbar. Mostly minor incidents, replied Jix. Reality hiccups, as the humans call them. Temporary probability fluctuations, localized physics variations, nothing catastrophic. The human methodology has proven surprisingly effective, admitted General Vrex grudgingly. Their structured training program has prevented the chaos many of us feared. Indeed, agreed ZYX Norbar, her chromatophores displaying a pattern of cautious optimism. Perhaps we underestimated. The meeting was interrupted by a priority alert. The holographic display activated automatically, showing a region of space near the galactic core. A massive distortion was spreading across several star systems, warping spacetime in patterns unlike anything previously documented. Report, commanded ZYX Norbar. Unknown phenomenon detected in the Sagittarius arm, reported the monitoring system AI. Preliminary analysis indicates fundamental restructuring of reality parameters on a scale exceeding all previous incidents by several orders of magnitude. Contact the Institute immediately, ordered ZYX Norbar. We need the human team. We've never seen anything like this, admitted James, studying the holographic models in the Emergency Response Center. The human team had arrived within hours of the alert, joined by their most advanced non-human students. This isn't an anger response distortion. It's something else entirely. The phenomenon had continued to expand, now affecting 27 star systems. Within the affected zone, reality itself appeared to be rewriting its fundamental properties. Gravity functioned differently. Light traveled along curved paths without mass influence. Molecular bonds formed impossible configurations. It's as if someone is redesigning physics from first principles, observed Lynn, her face both terrified and fascinated. But who could possibly have that capability? Could it be the interdimensional entity, suggested Dr. Tekla. Perhaps your game knights gave it ideas. No, replied James firmly. We've maintained strict protocols with the entity. This signature is completely different. It feels more deliberate. Less curious exploration, more intentional reconfiguration. Whatever it is, said Darius gravely, it's beyond our ability to address through reality persuasion techniques. We can influence reality's application, not rewrite its fundamental coding. A heavy silence fell over the command center as the implications sank in. If the foremost experts in reality manipulation considered this beyond their capabilities, what hope did the galaxy have? Excuse me. All eyes turned toward the voice. Standing nervously at the edge of the gathering was a small, gelatinous being, a Prilaxian maintenance technician named Glorf, who had been exposed to human anger energy during the initial research phase. I think I might have an idea, Glorf burbled timidly. We welcome all suggestions at this point, said ZYX Norbar diplomatically, though her chromatophores betrayed skepticism. Well, continued Glorf, his gelatinous form quivering slightly, during my exposure to the human emotional energy, I experienced something the analysis missed. It wasn't just anger that allowed reality manipulation, it was the absolute certainty that reality should conform to expectations. That's consistent with our findings, confirmed James. But this situation goes beyond expectations. Whatever's happening is redefining the possible. Exactly, agreed Glorf, gaining confidence. So perhaps we need to adjust our approach. Instead of trying to bend existing rules, maybe we need to suggest better ones. Before anyone could respond, Glorf moved to the central console and placed a pseudopod on the interface. His normally translucent form suddenly glowed with an inner light as he focused intently on the holographic display of the distortion. Reality should make sense. Glorf declared with unprecedented authority for a maintenance technician. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the monitoring systems went haywire. The distortion at the galactic core pulsed once, twice, and began to contract. Reality parameters throughout the affected region gradually shifted back toward standard configurations, though with subtle, elegant improvements that the scientists would spend decades trying to fully understand. As the crisis subsided, all eyes turned to Glorf in astonishment. "How did you do that?" gasped Dr. Jix. Glorf's form rippled in what approximated a shrug. "I just thought about how reality should work if it were properly designed, with all the inefficiencies corrected. It seemed like the logical approach. You redesigned reality, because the existing version seemed inefficient," clarified Tekla slowly. "Just the problematic sections," Glorf clarified helpfully. "I left the parts that were working well alone. I hope that's okay." James burst into laughter, a reaction soon shared by his entire team. "Glorf, I think you've just demonstrated the most advanced application of reality persuasion yet documented. You didn't just adjust reality, you debugged it." "I just applied what I learned from fixing the environmental systems," explained Glorf modestly. "When something doesn't work right, you don't just force it to function, you identify the underlying design flaw and implement a better solution." High Administrator ZYX Norbar's chromatophores displayed a pattern never before seen in the historical record, one that xenolinguists would later classify as cosmic resignation combined with reluctant amusement. "Let the official record show," she announced formally, "that the galaxy has now entered an era where maintenance technicians can rewrite the fundamental properties of existence through what can only be described as cosmic tech support." "Reality," observed Darius with the weary wisdom of someone who had spent too long in customer service, "is just like any other system. Eventually, you have to turn it off and on again." As the gathered officials and scientists attempted to process this paradigm shift, Glorf turned to James with genuine curiosity. "Does this mean I qualify for a promotion?" he asked innocently. "Glorf," replied James, placing a hand on what approximated the Prilaxian's shoulder, "I think you've just invented an entirely new job category." In the months and years that followed, a new division was established within the galactic governance structure, the Department of Existential Maintenance, staffed by carefully selected individuals from across the sentient spectrum. Their mandate: identify and address inefficiencies in the underlying fabric of reality itself. Glorf, appointed as the first director of Cosmic Systems Optimization, established training programs that blended technical expertise with philosophical principles and the human-discovered emotional techniques. His first instructional manual became the most referenced text in galactic history, particularly its opening line, which would be quoted by beings throughout known space whenever facing seemingly insurmountable problems. "Have you tried getting angry at reality and then asking it politely to reboot?" As for the human team, they eventually returned to Earth, where they established a small consulting firm specializing in impossible problem resolution. Their services remained in high demand, though they made it a point to take extended vacations during what Antoine insisted on calling cosmic patch update periods. Somewhere beyond the dimensional boundaries, the ancient entity continued its weekly game nights with selected human representatives, gradually introducing games of its own devising that reinterpreted concepts like winning and losing in ways that occasionally gave mathematicians severe headaches but proved surprisingly popular among children and quantum physicists. And deep within the bureaucracy of the Galactic Council, a new regulation was quietly added to the official first contact protocols: when encountering a previously unknown species, priority assessment should be given to how they react when frustrated. Some problems, it turned out, just needed someone angry enough to tell the universe to fix itself.